I'm going to jump into the formal intro. Let me just say in general how much we appreciate, Babur, you taking time out of your vacation to share a little bit with our students. I'm so excited about this combination of cohorts where we've got technical expertise along with some marketing acumen, and your background, as I've shared just a few minutes ago, fits so perfectly with both groups. It's an unusual combination of skill sets. So I'm really excited to jump into this. So let me just give you an idea of who Babur de Los Santos is. He's associate professor of economics and director of our business analytics program at Clemson University's Wilbur and Ann Powers College of Business, and Amazon visiting academic. Before joining Clemson, Dr. de Los Santos obtained an economics PhD at the University of Chicago and was faculty at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business and deputy director of economic studies at Mexico's Competition Commission, investigating antitrust cases in the financial and telecommunications sectors. His research has been published in top peer-reviewed journals in economics, marketing, and information technology. His work has generated new insights on information frictions faced by consumers in online markets, product customization in online platforms, and search engine optimization, among others. At Amazon, he developed and owned a CEO-approved science model used to set fees to third-party sellers in the US, Europe, and Japan. As part of Amazon Web Services Central Economics, he was the lead economist for the EC2 Commercial Software Services Organization, providing strategic advice and actionable insights from economic impact analysis of go-to-market programs, sales and partners initiatives, and marketing and enablement programs. Currently, he advises Amazon's automatic profitability management organization to provide scalable and measurable economic solutions regarding negotiation with vendors, including algorithmic analysis of vendors' requests for changes in wholesale prices. And let me just say, he's an all-around great guy, as is his wife. So we're so happy to have you here. And let me turn it over to you to initiate the conversation, Babur.
Oh, thank you very much, Greg. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really happy to see so many participants. And thank you, Greg and his team, for the invitation and the opportunity. I see more of a sales pitch from my side, even though it is a conversation. It's a sales pitch in the sense of leveraging data and economic analysis and business analytics analysis to inform business decisions. And you guys are going to go and do that, or probably you already do that in marketing, or in other areas within your organizations. So what I want to do today, I don't have a formal presentation given the breadth of topics. What I want to do today is to give you a sense of how I think we should be thinking about leveraging data to make business decisions. I have seen that there is a lot of investments currently in two main things. One is data acquisition, data storage, and first-hand data analysis, like for example, constructing data pipelines and dashboards to inform business leaders to make decisions of how the data is, right? What I have not seen more, and I see a little bit in Amazon, and that's what the push that a lot of technology companies are doing nowadays, is how to ask the right questions of what would have happened if we had not made that decision. Or say that a different way is, what is when you're trying to estimate the incremental impact of a particular action, the question is not the difference between what actually happened, is that before and after analysis. The question should be, what would have happened with that particular action? So let me let me give you an example of an advertising. Imagine that you do an advertising campaign. You invest $1 million in a particular ad buy. Most the analysis that is done is they observe a particular outcome measure of that action or the ad buy, and they compare the outcome after the ad buy with the outcome before the particular ad buy. That analysis in a lot of cases is flawed in the sense that the ad buy might be timed with another campaign or might be timed with some seasonal effects or particular action. Then the question becomes how to capture the incremental impact of that ad buy, of that particular campaign. Historically, it's very hard to do that. Historically, people have just looked at what is the percent change over time, right, of that particular outcome. Then there is this big push in technology companies of doing experimentation or doing A/B tests, which is basically the gold standard of science, which is you have two groups that you believe you randomly assign it in order to get a comparable sample. They say they are exactly the same. There are two groups that are the same. And I'm going to do an action, a treatment, a particular group, and I compare the outcomes, right? There is a lot of A/B testing in advertising nowadays, especially in the technology sector. The issue that a lot of advertising campaigns in the technology sector is that you need a huge effect in order to be detectable, right? So the experimentation is a little bit limited in what you can be done. I tried to do in Amazon to impose some experimentation protocols within the company in Amazon Web Services. In a lot of cases, it's very difficult to do, especially when you have business to business setting. You cannot experiment to a company when you are offering them incentives to adopt a product and you say, well, maybe we'll not offer you the product if you are in the control group, right? So my proposal to you, and that's what I said, this is a sales pitch, is to start thinking about counterfactuals. And there is a lot of methodologies that you are acquiring nowadays within the MBA program and in other series that we offer that are how we should be thinking about a counterfactual state. A counterfactual state is I give an incentive to a company to acquire a product. What would have happened to the particular outcome if I had not offered that particular product? In a lot of cases, this can be approximated with a lot of techniques that we have, which is finding a set that is comparable, like a propensity score matching, or we can have a regression discontinuity design, or we can do synthetic controls. These techniques are being used nowadays to ask that particular question, which is the same question of causality that an experimental protocol does, right? What I want to propose to you in all your organizations is to start thinking about how to measure the incremental impact of an action. And it can be a lot of different actions. It can be advertising actions. It can be a new product launch actions. It can be launching a new incentive program. It can be like in what I'm doing right now. It can be, well, we're accepting and rejected code changes from vendors. And these are thousands and thousands. Because given the current inflationary environment, they're say, okay, Amazon, you had to pay us more for this particular product. How do we measure the impact of our decisions? How do we measure the impact that in some cases we say accept, given a set of heuristics, and in some cases we say reject? Step number one is to measure the effect of the decisions. Once you measure it and you put in place a measurement system, then you go back and say, well, now I can estimate the causal impact of the decisions. Now let's change the heuristics, right? And when I change the heuristics and you have a measurement system, you know if you are doing a good job or not. And also you can implement maybe an automatic algorithmic solution based on science. It might be a machine learning science model. It can be, supervised learning model, even a neural network. But the most important part within an organization is how do you know it works, right? So what I'm proposing to you today is to think about the problem that you have about measuring the impact of a particular program a lot of cases in Amazon and a lot of organizations, leaders want to measure the impact in order to also say, what invest in this headcount in that particular program, what invest in millions of dollars to do this marketing campaign or this particular program. We give you an incremental headcounts of 20 people, shows the impact. A lot of cases, it's very hard to show the impact of your organization or your own team with a measurement system in place. But in order to be a correct measurement system, had to be a science-based system. In a lot of cases, you don't do experimentations. You cannot experiment. You cannot say, put salespeople in different regions and you say, okay, I put that randomly assign salespeople because that might not have the greatest impact. But in a lot of cases, based on what you have done, you can have a science-based solution of measuring the impact of your team, your organization, or a particular actions, right? So how I see is step number one, get the data in place, have the pipelines correct, have the data analysts create dashboards, data information. But for the second step, and really leverage the current environment of fast, cheap storage, fast, cheap compute, fast, cheap analytics, you need to have a system in place that measure the impact of those actions. Right? And you'll be surprised how hard it is to convince leaders sometimes of doing experimentation, preaching to acquire sometimes like, hey, we know the experiments are good, but we cannot do experimentation. You have to find a solution to do it with observational data. And that's my pitch to you guys, because I've seen in a lot of different settings. Greg, you have a question? I saw you raising your hand.
Let me ask a question. This is clarification. And I know you can't share a ton of specifics about your work with Amazon, but can you give us some examples of systems, things that you've done, that you've worked on, and generally speaking, what kind of insights did the analysis provide? I think that'd be really helpful.
Yes. You got me right in my web of generalities. I appreciate it. Yeah, there is limited of what I can say and what I cannot say, but let me try to maybe pick 2 or 3 examples, very general, tell you what I did. Let me explain 2 of them on the sellers fees organization, which is that 60% of the revenue from products that Amazon sell come from party sales, right? So how it works is there is 2 branches of how people buy products from Amazon. One is Amazon buys a product from vendors and Amazon stores it and sells it. The other branch is a third-party seller tells Amazon, okay, this is my product. I put it in a website and send it to the fulfillment centers. And when an order comes in, Amazon will fulfill the order on behalf of the seller. In order to recoup the cost of providing those services, Amazon sets fees for third-party sellers. And the fees they're public. They vary according to the category of the product and also what type of service is provided. So if it's a type of product that Amazon fulfills the order and stores the product in the fulfillment center, there will be a storage fees based on the characteristics of the product and the size. If it requires Amazon to transport the product to a consumer, there will be a fulfillment fee. And also there will be a fee that is called a referral fee, which is basically a royalty. It's a percentage of the selling price that Amazon recoups. On average, it's about 15% of the price consumers pay is a fee for Amazon to provide the website services of connecting sellers and consumers. Then the question becomes, how do we set fees for the sellers, right? Of course, there are a lot of different fees that are described. The major ones are the third-party, the referral fees when you sell a product, and the other ones are the fulfillment fees. Now think about the trade-offs of when you set a fee that is too high. When you set a fee that is too high, then a seller, if they want to sell the product through Amazon, then they will experience lower margins, lower profitability, and it will not make sense for them to sell it through Amazon, right? If the fee is too low, in a lot of cases that happens as well, then Amazon will not recoup the cost of providing the seller, the fulfillment cell, the human, all the technology, the capital, and the storage. The fulfillment centers operations are very expensive, and you have the trade-off of I want more sellers to bring more product to the fulfillment sellers, in order to have also a large selection where customers come to Amazon to find the products they want. So setting the fee has these two trade-offs between monetization, which is the pressure to increase the fees, and seller profitability, which is the pressure to lower the fee, because you want the sellers happy as well, right? And you want them to come back to bring the product and sell the product to us, right? So what I did, that was my first project at Amazon a couple of years back, was to bring science into the fee setting process. How do you bring science into the fee setting process? Well, you see it by looking at the data that we have, that we can approximate how sellers' behavior. Then we look at the consumer, and that's a big part of it. You want a website to thrive. You want consumers to buy the products at a reasonable price. So actually, low prices are great for Amazon, and that's one of the reasons you have to take it into consideration. If consumers keep coming back because of low prices, sellers will bring the product because this is where the consumers are. So I developed a model to estimate consumer surplus, right, of each transaction. So you have consumer on one side, then you have Amazon monetization strategy on another side, then you have sellers on the other side, and then you do a combination of not necessarily heuristics, but econometric models to estimate consumer surplus. You need to estimate demand. You need to estimate elasticities, consumer sensitivity to prices. To estimate the seller side, you need to understand how sellers behave. And then you have the data from Amazon, and then you do create a scenario, what if scenarios, right? These counterfactual scenarios of if I set this fee, what will happen to these three components, right? And these three components are related, right? Amazon wants consumers to be happy, sellers want consumers to be happy, but there is this tension in this trade-off that go in opposite directions. That's why you have to model them, at the same time. It's a little bit more complicated. It's not only one measurement system. It was a three-way measurement system and a dynamic system in the middle. That's the most complex model that I did. In Amazon Web Services, it was all measurement, which is a lot simpler. In Amazon Web Services, as you know, it's also what Amazon Web Services does is provide compute solutions to companies. And this, I'm talking about the largest company in the world, use Amazon Web Services right now. It's extremely cheap to store your whole data center in Amazon, to back up your entire data centers and all your storage, database, compute solutions within Amazon. And it can be is safe, you can, and this is the biggest part of using Amazon Web Services, is scalable. When a company buys a data center, they have to maintain the data center, and it becomes obsolete really quickly. Because if you buy the hardware, well, you have the last generation of hardware. If a new processor comes, it's not that cheap to upgrade to the new solution. So what your companies do in Amazon Web Services is that it's just you're renting the service. So if a new cheaper chipset comes, you can just flip the switch and move to the new chipset. You can flexibly adapt. But the most important thing is that you can scale up and down for usage, right? Where it could happen.
And Babur, it looks like we have a question from Carlos.
Okay. Let me just finish the Amazon the web service an example of why companies use it, and then I'll take the question.
Okay.
When the COVID happened, Zoom became this huge tool that millions of people adopted. But Zoom was very nascent. They didn't have the capabilities in-house to run Zoom. So how do you think now millions of people can use Zoom? It's because it's hosted in Amazon Web Services. So when demand increases, they can just spawn more instances, more servers in Amazon Web Services, and that's how they can grow really quickly. They just spread capacity across Amazon Web Services servers. What happened if we go back that everybody is in person? Some can scale down, and they don't have this unused capacity of those investments. They can scale up and down also with seasonality. And all the companies in the world can do it. So all of the services that we provide is solutions. Like, okay, what if we migrate your servers and give you incentives? How do we measure the impact of the program? What if we change the prices for a particular process? How do we measure that? Right? What is the pass-through of Windows licenses to the consumer? Should we pass through the whole licensing, or should we give them a discount? Those questions are the ones that we can measure. But let me stop here, and I feel Carlos. Carlos, you're free to go on a video or not and ask a question.
Yeah, no, the question I had is, not only currently, but currently, but also like if you were to go to another job or work for another company, what technologies do you use and have you used, will probably use? And I'm talking in terms of, are you in like to create this pricing models, for example? Are you using like R, Python, and are you utilizing business intelligence platforms like Power BI or Tableau, etc.?
Yes, that's a great question. We use them all, but they have different uses, right? For instance, Tableau is really good to produce dashboards, right? So you have a pipeline, and then you have some business intelligence people that put the tables together with SQL, or you have an ETL, you have an extract from a load process, and the Tableau is just it's like a Silverlight. It's just the front face that you can create a real-time pipeline to the data in a format, graphical or tables, or for business leaders to consume, right? That's the Tableau angle. It's very important, a great tool, but doesn't answer the higher level business questions of what is the impact of something, right? It is just tracking the data. In terms of R and Python, those are the two workhorses that a technology company use to create machine learning models, right? Python is used throughout, all the technology firms, from Facebook, Instagram, Google, Amazon. Everybody uses Python. A lot of people use R, becoming also more prevalent, and we have an R services, an R server in Amazon Web Services Central Econ team. But people use Python and are interchangeable. But in terms of what software to use and in terms of what you should learn, I think those are great if you are going to do data science in a higher level. But for the more general consumption, I will actually propose for you guys and everybody to learn SQL. Because as the data becomes extremely difficult, extremely large, you need a SQL solution to acquire and transform. And sometimes even the business leader high in the organization need to understand this, which is something that is good for you to understand, maybe not master. You are going to be a leader in the organization. You need to understand how the data is consumed, how the right data is given to the correct party. And even you will think directors, vice presidents of large organization, I advocate to have understanding not only of the what if questions on what is the incremental impact, but how the data pipeline and how the data is consumed. Because a lot of times I've seen that the data from Tableau or Power BI, they're put in a way that is not actionable. So I think this is what I advocate in the business analytics organization is you have to have a business questions and top foremost, you have to go top down and you say, what is the business question? Okay, we started a program that costing us $50 billion. We green lighted. What is the impact of that program? You need to have a measurement before you start spending that money, right? Are you going to measure the impact through an experiment? So are you going to create an experimental framework to measure the impact of the 50 million? And this is for scalability, right? You invest 50 million, then you ask what is the impact of that for next time to invest 50, right? And next time to invest more. It's a question of measurement. And if you are not going to do it experimentally, and we don't, in Amazon Web Services, it's not that much experimentation because of the business setting, then you have to ask yourself, how we want to measure? Are we want to measure it observationally? We give this incentive to this group of companies. Let's obtain a similar match of companies to look at the difference in growth between the set that was incentivized and the set is not. And then I'm talking about the pipeline. If we're measuring like that, then we need a pipeline. If you do it in Tableau, you are going to just track changes over time of that group, right? Which is limited. But if you do it in Python or R or even in Stata, you can create a model of, you can do a propensity score matching model on the fly that runs on the pipeline data that you already created with Power BI and gives an actionable insight to the business leader, which is, this is an incremental impact of that. So it really depends what you're trying to do. If you just want to consume data in a particular way and show summary statistics and graphs, some tools are great. But if you want to do something more, like a supervised learning and create a product, then you need to push more onto the R and Python of the world. So it really depends on what you want to position yourself. How I see it is data scientists are more on the Tableau, Power BI, just pipeline creation and summary statistic data. And if you want to do more data, what I call business analytics science or science, you need to adopt the other technologies, right? R and Python and be more. But that doesn't mean that you need to have those tools in order to be a leader, right? At least you need to understand it, right? And you need to have like a top view of, okay, this is how it works. This is, and recognize the pain points of data science to make decisions and allocate headcount and allocate. Those are also good settings. You don't need to know how to program in order to make decisions, but you need to know how it works, right? And what is the, what are the blockages of some type of work, right? And I see it a lot, right? In the leadership thing, sometimes creating a Tableau is easy, but the background for large amounts of data, the pipelines is very, it's an investment that you need to recognize as well sometimes. Does that answer your question, Carlos?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, you know, it makes sense. And, you know, it's, I think it's spot on with some of the things that, you know, we experience here in the program. My class, this is our last week. And so we spent two years now in this program. And along the way, you know, we have been exposed to, you know, pipelines and data transformation and extract, transform, and load. And, you know, it goes hand in hand with what you're saying. And you know, we come to the realization that you spend so much time just prepping the data before you can put it into, you know, a pretty visual format. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be pretty, right? But it has to, I think in organizations, a lot of organizations are, you know, I have a conversation with Prisma Health. They have the data there. in the servers, but they don't have the people to extract the data and actually put it even in a table that you can run regressions and do data analysis, right? They don't have the resources. And what I told them is, you have to do first, show the organization the value of what you're doing, right? Show the organization what is maybe a pilot when you have a particular treatment, a particular thing that you can measure in a scientific manner, and you show the value to the organization. You know, they did a program and they thought it worked and it was green lighted and they actually did it. Then how do you convince the leadership of the impact of that program? If you go and measure it, then you can go back to your to the leadership and say, look, this is the impact. We invested $500,000 and this is the impact in terms of patient outcomes. This is the impact in profitability. This is the impact on capacity utilization of the hospital. And then I need more people. Now I need that. Now let me hire all these BIs to create all these tables, because what we did here, we are going to measure it. I need 5 more people to master students to do this, right? So, otherwise, how can you convince them that what you did was correct or had an impact? Go ahead, Greg.
So another question that has just come in, and I'm going to try to, you guys feel free to send additional questions via chat if you would like. Katie asks, is the first step when setting fees to determine your market? If so, how do you go about identifying your target audiences?
Oh, that's a tricky question. We don't call it markets. I have an interesting background in this. So I work in the Competition Commission in Mexico, and how, or the DOJ or the Competition Commission, the identified markets are, is a very narrow definition based on substitution of products, right? If you change the price of a particular, let's say, coffee mug, then what are the options that consumers have to switch to a different coffee mug, right? To identify what is the potential number of coffee mugs that are there. So a market is a loaded question in the sense of, is it a product category? Is it a country? Who are the sellers in this market, right? Right now, we don't go that particular way to identify market. How do we go is, sometimes you need to identify the blockers within your organization. Like for instance, in Amazon, the fees are set at the category level. So electronics has a fee. Accessories, like let's say jewelry has a fee. Footwear has a fee, and they are different, and they've been changed over time based on business analysis and heuristics, right? And that's a historical way that fees are set. So you come to an organization and you say, no, everything you have done is wrong. Then you are going to have a hard time changing things and being tracked seriously. So sometimes you go, and in order to propose a science solution, you have to propose an incremental science solution, right? Based on the way things are done. So maybe as you are correct saying, how do I identify the market for a particular fee? I say, how is this done right now? And how this is done right now is by category. It's called GL, which is general ledger, and it's electronics has a fee, right? Then you take that as your market, like electronics in the US is a market, or electronics in Singapore is a market, right? And you try to set the fee at that particular level, because historically that's how it's done. Me as an economist, I will say, well, a market is not the whole category. A market is iPhone accessories, and that's a market, right? Or heaters, that's a market. It's a very narrowly contained definition of market, right? But then someone will say, well, yeah, but if the profits in that particular subcategories they're very high, then other suppliers might change what they sell and enter that category. Yes, that's correct, right? So that's the economic definition and how companies define market or categories changes. It depends what you have. Fees here, I didn't identify. We took it as a given what is being done in the past in order to have that set. I hope, Katie, that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Very helpful.
Other questions? I have something that I'd like to throw out to have you address. This relates to what you're trying to do at the college level. And we've got two very unique groups of students here that I've shared with you. One that many would argue are probably less technical, less data savvy versus the analytics, the folks in that analytics program. Why is it important for the functional areas of business, all of them, to become data literate? How does that improve the value for an organization, and why should we impose that on people that don't view their primary role as data analysts?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So in a lot of my interactions in Amazon Web Services, my business stakeholder, it was vice president of EC2 services. EC2 is elastic compute, basically what we're selling the compute to all the companies, right? He is a vice president from the product development side, like provide solutions, right? Not this, but he had a huge business acumen. And what I noticed is that even leaders that are not maybe data savvy, they really understand to ask the right question. And in order to ask the right question, they need to understand data very well, right? And I was surprised how literate even people that were not trained as statisticians or econometricians or have this background that were more coming from the engineering side, had this business acumen. And I think asking the right questions of the data is the most important part, right? A lot of times, if you don't, and that's what my pitch at the beginning was, if you only have dashboards, they only tell you what happened. They don't tell you what would have happened. We invested $1 million and we saw a 10% lift. That's the lift. Is the tricky question is, okay, that increased the 10% over time, will have increased the same or will have increased more, right? Because Amazon Web Services is growing at more than 20% every year. So if we see an increment, a growth of 25%, is that 5% is trend, or is it a result of the program and our investments? How do you measure the impact on your investment? What do you want to know? Well, should we put more money into that particular program? That question comes back and back and back to us. First, demonstrate that you have an impact, and then you scale it, right? So anything from human resources, an area that you would think doesn't need a lot of data statistics, is being used right now in a lot of organizations. They have data on retention, in churn, in impact of salary, and people being happy. They measure employee satisfaction in human resources. In order for a business leader to make decisions in terms of salary or in terms of other compensation for employees, you need to understand what is the impact of those actions that you do. Companies they capture data systematically, they survey employees systematically to what is the impact. Tell me another area, operations. That data, that's the oldest data savvy part of a lot of companies, but there is a lot of questions that are not counterfactual. They should be counterfactual. There is we put a different process in place, and we think it's better because we are churning at 10%. The question is, what would have the impact if we not had that? You have a measurement, you need a measurement system in place, but the leader needs to be able to recognize that question and ask that question at every step of the way. Wholesale foods, they implement changes all the time. How do you know those are correct changes? Amazon Video, for instance, they buy programs. They have in place systems to measure what is the impact of that particular program, right? Compared to what other show we should have presented, or you have system in place to just value, should we buy that particular show or not? And you need to have a system in place to measure this. So leaders in any organization need to have the right question. And after they have the right question is, what data do I need to have to answer that question? And what methodology can I apply to answer that particular question? But yeah, every area, finance too.
Great. And Katie, if you don't mind, would you just unmute and ask your question? It's a great question.
Sorry, yeah, my question is actually 2 in 1. And I'm very intrigued by this conversation. You mentioned organizations having data but not expertise to utilize the data for strategic decisions. What is that person called? What is that skill set? Is it business analyst?
It changes from organization to organization. In Amazon, they call it business intelligence, but I don't think those are the right ones, because they are good in providing a subset of data, but not a set of answers, more like summary statistics answers, but not the next step, right? This is a great question. What is that person called? My funny side of me, I would say economist, because I'm an economist, but it really depends that in a particular organization. The person that is taking the summary statistics and descriptive statistics to the next level, that's the person. And that person might be doing experiments. That person might be doing some regression, counterfactual regressions, or it can even make forecasts. I did some forecasts as well. You need to ask the right questions about the forecast as well. There is a trick to do that as well. So I don't have a right answer to. I think business analytics is good. In a lot of organizations, they call them scientists. Some organizations, they mix them and they call data scientists when they're not really asking the right question. They're only creating pipelines and dashboards, which has value. But I think if you start as a business intelligence analyst or a business analyst, you need to keep asking that question. Okay, I provided this dashboard, I provided this data. Before the organization didn't even have this data to answer questions. You already did it. What other data what other analysis I can provide? Can we leverage things that happened in the past, like a natural experiment? We implemented something in the past. Can go back and measure the impact, right? More than the name, I will say is more of what can you do with the data provided. A lot of organizations, they can do a lot.
That's really helpful, thank you. And it sounds like a combination of skill sets, but not anything boxed into one particular person, unless maybe they're an economist.
No, I was joking. Not only economists have this. There is a lot of other people with the skill set. And this is what we're trying to, this way of thinking is what I want to instill in our students. And Grace is doing that in the MBA side. We're trying to do that on the undergrad side and the master, and have more engagements with organizations to even help them answer these questions, and maybe have interns that have these skill sets. But even if you don't know how to do it, you don't know how to program and have the, you don't know how to do a synthetic control or a propensity score matching, you need to identify the need and hire someone that does it for you, right? I think that's the best skill to have. And I have met a lot of leaders, engineers that don't have the skill to do it, but they understand the need to answer that particular question. What is the impact of a particular program? One thing is measurement after the fact. We already did a program, we did an incentive, we did an advertising campaign. The other is before, like predictive. If we were to do this, what is the impact that is going to have? That is a complementary set of skills, but it's also important to have. How do you know what is the impact before we do it? How do we know what that impact a particular program is going to have? And what you can have is, you can have tests, you can have pilots, but also the data, sometimes you can leverage things that's happening in the data to answer those predictive questions, right? And we have all predictive tools that we are teaching you guys that can answer this type of questions. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And you kind of touched on the second question I had too. It seems to be a transformation that's needed in organizations today, a different way of thinking to utilize data for predictive modeling, but then forecasting, bringing in a pipeline. So since there is such a need, and you think about the pipeline of our BI master students, that's what you touched on earlier. Are there things that companies can do right now to engage with students to solve industry challenges?
Yeah, you guys, I think that's what we're trying to create with the business analytics initiative, Clemson. More engagement with companies and put them in touch with our students. And I'm trying to create a certificate in order for having students with these skill sets. And hey, we need to bring companies on board and then place the students or companies with those data needs. Right now, companies think they need computer scientists, and they go and reach, oh, those guys know how to program in Python and R. But what I have found, and I had like directs with only computer science background, they lack the business acumen and they lack this counterfactual way of thinking, right? It's very prescriptive what they do. They can create a pipeline, they can deal with the system, they can create the data, but then they don't know what to do with the data. Not even presenting summary data that is actionable for leadership. And they need to be taught those skills, and that's what we're teaching you guys. How to, even summary statistics might be very important for companies. It might be enough. In a lot of cases, summary statistics, that's what you need to make decisions. Descriptive statistics and graphical analysis might be enough. You don't need to have a higher level modeling to do something. But students that we're trying to give these skills to our students, not only handle a little bit of the pipeline, but that second level, you have some data, what do you do with that? Like, how do you analyze it systematically to answer a business question? And that's our goal. You can always email me and see if I have some students that you might need. You can email Greg, and maybe we can put companies in contact with the students. We have a lot of students with different skill sets. Happy to do that. We're thrilled to do that. That's actually my goal. Have students connect with companies.
So we've got just a few more minutes. It is music to my ears to hear that, I think I've shared with you previously, the analytics program was developed by having conversations with 35 companies. And they basically said exactly what you just shared, is that I can go find a quote, an analyst with the technical skills, but we need to overlay that with a business acumen and understanding to make better decisions. And so, in fact, that's at the heart of our program. So that was super helpful to hear that reiterated, that you believe that there is value in this broad understanding of analytics.
Yeah, you touch a great point, and I see that Sean has a related question. he asked, how do you apply data in an entrepreneurial setting? How does one use data analytics as a business model? Or is it consulting the only avenue? Well, that's what consulting people do. Consulting people do, and I know a lot of consultants, they come and ask for the data first, and then they figure out what can I do with the data. Step number one, describe the data. What do we have, right? And that is, in my view, one of the most important steps, very descriptive of everything. Have a really good understanding of how to arrange the data in a way that is business oriented, that you can get insight just from describing the data. But then consulting sometimes go the other step, right? That in the way that I described. Sometimes they go and do more analysis, regression analysis. Maybe they propose an experimentation, but this is very limited what they do. I actually think that a lot of organizations cannot leverage consulting really well, because the data and the pipelines are not set up so much that are readily used for consultants. And a lot of time of consultants is just getting that data in place, right? And they just stop at describing the data. If organizations systematically collect and analyze and even produce dashboards, and then ask these questions in-house, they can use consultants strategically for other questions. Right? What is the incremental impact of a particular initiative, right? If they don't have it in-house. But I think every organization should have an in-house data business analytics setup. The greatest example of this is Netflix. Netflix, when they started, they analyzed everything. And they experimented with a lot of things. They experimented with the envelope size, they experimented with the areas where they're going to expand. I'm talking at the very beginning, before it was digital. You guys are very young, but before they used to put like the CD in some envelopes. And they started in California, and they started expanding in California, and it was not nationwide. And it was very manual the way they did it. Like they put the envelope by hand. They experimented on the envelope size and the weight. And they experiment, and they also have a lot of tracking. How many people came back and reordered. So they put a lot of things that you don't know right now that were very important, like having people have a queue and having like rate movies. They analyze what is the impact of having that, right? They analyze what is, they had a promotion with the DVD players. They landed Sony DVD players, and they put a Netflix subscription in the hardware, and that was a huge for them. But then they can track the people that were through that channel, that they bought a Sony DVD and they subscribe, and they track how many users come back, how many users order, how many stay. All of this, they had it in place from the get-go to measure the impact of every single thing they move. You think of technology, look at Google. They do A/B testing for everything. They changed something in the algorithm. They have A/B testing. You don't see it, but they direct traffic to A, to the treatment, and you see something, and B, you see something else. And they measure the impact. They compare the impact of two groups. It's an experiment, but it's hidden. Facebook does it, Instagram does it, Amazon does it. We have a web lab, and we have a consumer comes, and then we track the consumer that had a treatment over time, and we have the comparable consumer that were randomly assigned to another arm of the treatment, and you compare the consumers. There are experiments being done in-house in all the technology companies as we speak. You can have you'll be running 100 experiments. What you need as an organization, it depends what you do as an organization, but you have to have that measurement system in place. And that's where it creates value. Like imagine that you change the design of your website. How do you know it has an impact? Well, some of the traffic you can redirect to the old version of the website. Some of the traffic you redirect to the new version of the website. And you can track outcomes, how many people come back, how many people buy, how many people click. How you track intermediate and final outcomes and compare the groups. It is an experimental setting that you can apply that. You can do it even if you're a hospital. I know that people frown upon experimental people on treatment, but hospitals do changes in things that are experimental like when there are like medicine shortages, right? They kind of, doesn't exist a particular drug. What they do is they substitute, and doctors do it in the background, but they don't tell you they're doing it. And you can leverage that variation to estimate what is the impact of the shortage in patient outcomes, right? On how long the patients stay in the hospital, how often they come back, etc. Right? So having the data and measure things in place, in-house, is a lot more valuable than going through consulting, right? You can always leverage consulting, but it's very limited and it's very time-consuming to engage in consulting in a lot of cases, which reduces the value of the data, in my opinion.
So I feel somewhat guilty looking over your shoulder at the beautiful beach, and I am going to maintain our 1 hour cutoff. My guess is that we could go on longer, but I am not going to do that. So I hope that all of our students enjoyed the presentation. It's a wonderful way to get started on this residency weekend. And Babur, thank you so much for agreeing to spend an hour of your time with us.